Have you been thinking about improving your podcast SEO game, but you don't know where to start? Or perhaps you're a complete beginner to SEO and you're just looking for different ways that you can start bringing more listeners into your audience. This is where our guests come in. Sarah McDowell and Tazmin Suleman host the SEO Mindset Podcast. They're both experts when it comes to getting more eyes on your content using search engine optimization. And in this episode, we cover what is SEO and why do podcasters need to be thinking about it, how to get started with podcast SEO so you can bring in more listeners to your podcast, how to avoid overwhelm as a podcaster, the benefits and challenges of running a co-hosted podcast, how to balance searchable keywords with clickable titles, what you should be doing with your podcast website to optimize it for growth, and much more. Between them, they have a ton of podcasting insights, making this a perfect episode for anyone looking to grow their show. Hi Tazmin and hi Sarah, thank you for joining me on Podcasting Amplified. How are you doing today?
Hello. Well, thank you very much for having the both of us. We're double trouble, aren't we, Tazmin, today?
Never thought of us as double trouble, but yeah, it's very pleasant to be here. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time out of your day off as well, Tazmin. So just to give the listener a rundown. So we've got Tazmin Suleman and Sarah McDowell. Sarah is a podcast producer and manager, an SEO specialist, and Tazmin is a confidence and well-being coach who coaches women in SEO on how to progress in their career and lives. Did I get that right? Or did I miss anything important?
Tazmin is also excellent at playing the kazoo and she can juggle.
I didn't even know what that was until yesterday. Sarah's saying, I think you should play this. I thought, you're mad. Don't know what you're talking about.
Was this on your podcast?
No, sorry, joking aside.
So the SEO Mindset Podcast, it's been getting on for a year and a half now, I think, and it's co-hosted by both of you. So what made you decide to start the podcast originally back then?
So Sarah and I are both parts of the same community, Women in Tech SEO, which is brilliant, and it's becoming even more brilliant. I don't know how it was possible, but Arita's found a way. And Sarah put out a message, is anyone interested in learning more about podcasting? And I still do, write poetry. And one of my friends had said, why don't you do a podcast about poetry? I didn't really know much about podcasting. Sent her a message. And then we got talking about the challenges of working in SEO. So the overwhelm, the anxiety, the imposter syndrome, all of those things. And it didn't take any time at all for us to think, why don't we do a podcast on this? And I think from the first chat to our first recording was 3 weeks, Sarah?
Pretty quick turnaround.
Yeah.
So yeah, there was just such a great opportunity because what we found was at the time, there was lots of wonderful podcasts out there to tell you how to do SEO, but there was a bit of a gap, wasn't there, Tazmin, of a podcast that sort of spoke about mental health, career development, personal growth for the SEO industry. So that's what we do. And my background is I've been podcasting since 2018, which I can't believe it's quite a while now. Like whenever I think back, I was like, oh, that's a few years now. And I love podcasting. And I've been in a very fortunate position that all my podcasts have been co-hosted. I've always done it with someone else. And naturally, organically, podcasts will come to an end or will stop or the project will cease. And I end up having a conversation with someone and then I'm up doing another podcast. And that's exactly what happened with Tazmin. And I don't know, from our first conversation, we kind of clicked quite soon off, didn't we? We had a great chat. And before we knew it, we were scheduling recording to record the episode, getting artwork sorted, all of that lovely stuff, and the SEO Mindset was born. And yeah, it's lovely because through the time that me and Tazmin have been doing the show, we're really good friends now. I mean, it was weird when we met in person for the first time because we did a lot of our recording remotely. And when I met Tasman for the first time in person, it was a bit weird because it was like, I know you so well, but this is the first time that I've seen you in person. I don't know. It was just a bit of a weird,
Yeah, I can
weird
imagine.
situation.
Cool. And then you mentioned, Sarah, you had a podcast in 2018, SEO SAS, and you found a kind of gap in the market
Yes.
with that one as well, didn't you?
It's all about finding those gaps, Joe.
Yeah.
That's cringe. Moving away from that cringe, but yeah. So SEO SAS came about because when I first got into SEO and I started going to conferences, listening to podcasts, I found that there wasn't a great deal, or at the time I couldn't find any purely female-led SEO podcasts. So I pestered my other good friend who works in SEO, Hannah Bryce, and she said yes. And so we launched SEO SAS because we coined ourselves as the GI Janes of the SEO industry. And that was one reason we started it. But we also wanted to bring a bit of fun and accessibility to SEO, because what we found was it can be a bit dry SEO, and with all the big words and the lingo, it can be overwhelming as well. And people can kind of think of SEO as a bit of a dark art or not really sure what's going on. So we wanted to talk about SEO in a way that was accessible. And something that was always quite fun was there's lots of lingo in any industry. There's going to be lingo, there's going to be buzzwords. And a lot of the podcast episodes was me mispronouncing words anyway. So hopefully that was relatable. But yeah, that was SEO SAS back in the day. But what's crazy, sorry, just quickly, is people still talk about SEO SAS, even though that ended a few years ago. I was at Brighton SEO, which is a conference for the SEO industry, and someone recognized my voice from SEO SAS, and I was like, what is this? This is crazy. So yeah.
Oh yeah, people miss it. You'll have to do a one-time comeback episode or something. And then Tazmin, you describe yourself as the accidental podcaster. So started a bit more recently, but you've still been podcasting for quite a long time now. The time goes quickly. So how have you found it? And do you feel like it's gone quickly? Do you feel like you've learned a lot in that sort of year and a bit?
I think what Sarah said was we clicked really early, and the first podcast we recorded was on fixed and growth mindset. And there were so many points in there, we decided we would split it into 2 episodes. We recorded the first, and she pressed stop and said, this is great. Why don't we just record the next one right now? And I think we very quickly found a way of complementing each other really well. And I think that's really continued. There's a lot of trust, having 2 people there. You share the workload, you bounce ideas off each other. So as it's become more and more of a part of our business, it's great when we have strategy sessions, because we come from different worlds, we have different angles, we respect each other a lot. And I think that's we've never fallen out, have we, Sarah? I'm just thinking.
You've jinxed us now. We're going to have a massive row
Got
in
that
the end
tomorrow.
of the SEO. Yeah.
I remember once I rang Sarah and I said, I need to talk to you. And she said, oh, you're not leaving, are you? I said, no, I was just going to ask you, you're vegan or vegetarian, because she was going to come round for a meal.
I think that's past trauma from where my other co-hosts have said, Sarah, I don't want to do this podcast anymore. So
I'm certainly becoming more and more aware of the power of podcasting. It gives you a voice, it gives you an opportunity to talk about the work that you do. And what's beautiful is that the coaching and the corporate training I do is very much aligned with the work that I do in the podcast. The topics overlap really beautifully. And again, for Sarah, there's that overlap. And I think it's you couldn't have designed it better. For me, there is still a lot to learn, because there is this impression that, oh, you're just talking about something. but there's a lot more to it. And as I'm growing into the role more and more, I'm seeing different elements now that we're more active on social, about publicizing the episodes, engaging with listeners. It's becoming definitely bigger than it was when we started. I had no idea about the complexity behind it all.
And what would you say are the benefits of co-hosting the podcast? Because I mean, well, benefits and maybe some of the challenges. Sarah, has it just been co-hosted podcasts that you've been part of?
Correct. Yes. I've never done one solo, and I think co-hosting, especially if listeners of this podcast, if you are thinking about starting a podcast or you want to do another one, but you're feeling overwhelmed by it, because I completely get it. When you take on any new project, when you take on anything new, whilst it's exciting, it's also overwhelming as well, because there's a lot of things that you have to organize. There's a lot of things that you have to plan, record, and all of that stuff. Now, having a co-host and having someone like Tazmin is amazing, because it's not just you have someone that you can lean on, and you hold each other accountable. You can also grow together. You can have strategy, and you've got a passion project that you both care about, and you celebrate your wins. Or, I mean, luckily, touch wood, we haven't had any losses yet. Lots of jinxing here, like we need to stop. But it's lovely having a collaborative project with someone like a podcast, and working with Tazmin where you can complement each other, because there's stuff that Tazmin brings to the table, there's stuff that I bring to the table, and it's not all solely on you. And it's, yeah, I love it. And I mean, I completely get that there are solo hosted podcasts out there and people love an internal project by themselves. But for me, co-hosting is always the way, just because there's something more special for me about creating something together with someone else who has the same beliefs and stuff. And it takes a bit of like trust and building that relationship and connection with each other. And I suppose me and Tazmin were lucky. So if I look back at my other co-hosted podcast, I've always known the co-host first. So we were friends first, or we've known of each other first, and then we've done this project together. For me and Tazmin, it was a little bit different. Like, we knew of each other from the community, but like we hadn't had that many interactions. But like, as soon as we realized what we wanted to achieve and create something together, it really helped with the bond. And I don't know what you think about that, Tazmin.
Well, I didn't know who you were until I saw that first message. So
who is this person?
Who is this person? I'll message her. But it was, I think we recorded in the March and we didn't see each other in person until the October. So that was quite a stretch of time. I think, you know, if Sarah or I were to write a description of the sort of person that we would want to co-host with, if we had gone about it that way, we couldn't have got luckier with the combination, because there are skills that Sarah has that, quite frankly, you know, I wouldn't know how to do it, and it would take me a long time to learn. There are things that I enjoy doing that Sarah's very happy for me to go off and do. And we've never even sat down and talked about, so, you know, what do you want to do? Which bits do you want to do? It's just naturally fallen. So we're very, very fortunate. And I don't know if I would want to do a podcast on my own. I think this is such a great way of doing it, because like Sarah said, you can lean on each other. There have been times when, because of whatever goes on in life, we've been saying, right, we need an episode to go out tomorrow, and, you know, we're stuck, and we record the night before, and it's this scramble to get this episode out. And at the same time, there have been times when we've been super organized, but nobody has berated each other. It's been, I think our values align. I think that's the key here. Our values on how we want to serve the industry, our values on how we respect each other, and the differences are complementary.
Yeah, I mean, just from my personal feeling as well, like I think we kind of need more co-hosted podcasts, to be honest. I think I find it easier to sort of feel like you're part of the gang, part of the team, when you're listening to the same two people each week, and you're sort of getting to know their relationship and so on. It's just, I don't know, it feels like you're part of it, and yeah, there aren't that many around. I feel like you could just find a niche you could find a gap in the market just by being the first sort of co-hosted podcast in a particular niche, probably.
I think also something, sorry just to jump in, but
No.
I want to say this before it goes out my mind, is chemistry.
Yeah.
There's something about when you're listening to two people and they have chemistry and they're having fun, the conversation is flowing, it's a joy to listen to. That is so rare, and it doesn't always happen. And I think if you've got someone that you vibe off, you bounce ideas off, you always have good conversations, and you both are interested in doing a podcast, go ahead and do it. One of my other podcasts, that's exactly what happened. So another podcast of mine, The Lipsticks, and that was a podcast for the LGBTQ plus community. And that came about because me and my good friend Jess Peace, we'd say something had happened in our day or week or what have you in our life. We'd message each other being like, I need a bit of a gay chat, or I need a bit of a gay moan. And we do voice notes, or we'll talk to each other. And this was during COVID, during lockdown. And after a while, I was like, I reckon there's something in here. There's something in here where me and you are having these conversations. Why don't we try and put it on a podcast and see what happens? And again, like, we were friends before, we had this chemistry, and the episodes just flowed, and the conversation was really raw. Because I think that's another thing, that there is loads of podcasts out there. Like, every man and his dog has a podcast. I don't 100% get that saying, but I've gone with it anyway. So you have to have ways to make yourself different. And whether that's a different angle, a different point of view, a different take on something, great. But what is always going to win is if your episodes are a joy to listen to, if you're bouncing off each other, you're having a conversation, you're getting raw, you're getting deep, you're having fun, you're having banter, that goes a long, long way. Sorry, I just had to say that. I'll get off my soapbox now.
No, thank you for that. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. It's like there was a business podcast I listen to sometimes. I used to listen to it all the time, and it was really helpful for me. And it was co-hosted at the time, and I was listening to it. And then eventually, one of the hosts left to do other things, and it just feels like, I don't know, it feels like two of your friends have just broken up or something. It was, I was just hoping each week it'll come back, and because you kind of miss that chemistry and that friendship. And
you feel like you're part of something, don't you?
Yeah. So you're both in the SEO space, and it would be a wasted opportunity if I didn't pick your brains on that, because SEO is something that podcasters, not all of them are thinking about. Some of them might have sort of heard of it and not sure where to start. Some of them might have gotten started by, just doing some of the basics, but not really sure where to go. Before we get started though, can I just get in a nutshell what SEO is exactly, and why a podcaster might need to think about it in terms of their marketing strategy?
I'm straight away got things that I want to say on a technical how-to perspective, but I think, Tazmin, you're going to be great at giving some tips for those who are feeling overwhelmed with SEO.
Perfect.
So I think that's probably a good way of tackling this. So shall I go first with the
let's get the overview, just to make sure everyone knows exactly what SEO is and what the point of it is for a podcaster.
Yeah, so SEO stands for search engine optimization. And basically, there's things that you can do to your podcast to optimize it for search engines like Google. So the idea is there's different tactics that you can do that when someone searches for a term or query or keyword in a search engine like Google, if you've done the right optimization to your podcast, you have more chance of being shown, because Google and other search engines, they have an algorithm, and an algorithm is basically a fancy word to say, here's a checklist of all the things that Google looks out for when it's looking at what pages to show for relevant searches. So does that give a good understanding, a good broad overview of what SEO is?
Yeah, I think I've got it.
I can bring in an analogy into this to help. So think of Google as a library. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So Google and other search engines are a library. It's a bit old school because I don't know if people physically go to libraries anymore, but I'm sticking with it.
I do.
All the books in the library are websites, and the website and then the pages of the books are website pages, and Google is your librarian. Yeah. So I mean, I might be going off on piece here, but I'm really trying to paint the picture and make it understandable. So what Google needs to do is it needs to crawl and look at websites and pages to index it and put it in its library. So think of that as a librarian reading all the books, sorting out the books and putting it on the shelves. Now, librarians have a categorization or a way to say what books should go in what places in a library and what sections. And Google is the same. It has its own checklist and ways that it sorts out the millions of pages so that when I go into the library, so when I go to Google, I know straight away that Google's going to show me what's relevant. And it's the same as a library. When you walk into a library, you know, okay, I want a book about science fiction. I know where to go. Does that analogy help?
Yeah. So if somebody wants to find an answer to a certain question, for example, they're going to visit Google, and then hopefully Google's going to point them in the right direction based on if those particular pages are giving them the right information.
Yeah, 100%. And why it's important to podcasters is you've got to think about discoverability and visibility for your podcast. So obviously, people can come across your podcast in lots of different ways. They can fire up their podcast playing platform of choice, whether that is Spotify, Apple, Amazon Music, what have you, and they can search in there. They'll go to social media, they'll see a clip that's gone viral and they want to check out the podcast, or there's lots of different ways people can come across your podcast. SEO is such a great opportunity because there's things that podcasters can be doing with their show and podcast to help with discoverability. So it's all about when especially when you're an independent creator and you're an independent podcaster, you have to think about discoverability. You have to think about all the ways that your podcast is visible. And SEO is one of the ways that you can do that.
And we're not going to go, massively into SEO strategy here, but just so the listener just has an idea of what it would look like in action, where would they be sort of optimizing things for the search engines? Sort of what aspects of their podcast are they going to be keeping in SEO in mind for when they're putting that together?
100%. So every podcaster, I recommend that every podcaster needs to have a website. Yeah, they need to have somewhere that you can direct Google and other searches to. So having a website for your podcast is important. Now, what's great is there's a lot of hosts out there that will create a website for you. For example, I use Captivate, and one of the tools and features within Captivate is I can create a podcast website. because you need to physically have something that Google can index and potentially show people. Then once you've got your website, there are some fundamentals that you need to be thinking about. So you need to have the main landing homepage for your website. The main landing page, homepage for your podcast. And you need to do some keyword research. So there's lots of keyword research tools out there. Some are free, some are paid for, but you need to start looking at what people are searching for that is relevant to your podcast as a whole. So you need to have a research, have a look for keywords that you can be using, and then you can optimize your homepage for that keyword. So make sure it's in your H1, so your main title of the page. You've got your metadata sorted. You've got subheadings, all of that. And what you also need to make sure is that individual episodes have individual pages on your website as well, because then you can do the same concept. You can do your keyword research, find the terms that people are using that is relevant to that podcast episode, and again, optimize that page for that keyword. Something to be mindful of is keyword stuffing. So you don't want to end up cramming a page full of keywords, synonyms, in the hope that Google's like, okay, this is what this page is about. I'm going to show it for this term, because Google's cracking down on that. That's not great for user experience. SEO should never hinder someone being on your website. So keywords is an important one. Transcripts. So another great way of so when Google is indexing pages and websites, it needs to have an understanding about what that page is about, because the more understanding that it has about the page, the better it is at showing you for relevant terms. And a transcript is a great way of doing this, because obviously podcast typically is audio format. I know there's an argument whether podcast should be just audio or video and all of that jazz, but I won't go down that rabbit hole. But always transcribe your podcast. You should have a transcription for accessibility reasons anyway, but having a transcript on your page allows Google more information about what that page is about. Because I mean, it might do in the future, but at the moment, it's not automatically transcribing your audio. And even if it did, it might get it wrong, because it's a tool. It's Google at the end of the day. How many times have you used a transcription software like Otter AI, Feed, Descript, whatever you're using, and you have to do tidying up because they get things wrong. So having a transcript on your page that you've edited and you've sorted out helps Google understand what your page and what your episode is about. And then another quick thing that I will mention is repurposing episodes as blogs or other pages of your website, because this is another way that you can attract people to your podcast and improve your visibility and discoverability. So what I always recommend is, with all your podcast episodes, take the transcript and repurpose it into a blog or article. Like, make sure that you actually spend the time formatting it as a blog, because you don't want to just post the transcript as the blog, because that's not going to work. You need to format it correctly. You need to do keyword research again. You need to optimize the main title, subheadings, the text, all of that stuff. And it needs to read like an article and a blog. And then what you should do is embed the podcast episode on the top of that article, because in effect what you're doing is you are attracting people from search engines like Google, and they come across your blog because you're answering a certain question. When they check out their blog, they actually realize, this is a podcast, this is an episode, I can listen to this. So it's a good way of taking people who weren't even planning on starting a podcast. Weren't even planning on listening to a podcast. I think everyone should start a podcast. And that's where my brain went for a second there. You'll take someone who wasn't expecting to listen to a podcast or expecting to read a blog, but they actually prefer audio as a medium, and you've got yourself a new listener. So that's a very quick whistle stop tour of SEO, but I do think the key thing that I want Tazmin to talk about, I think is important, is the overwhelm side of it.
To an untrained eye, that was a lot, and that's not even everything. So I think taking a step back, to anyone who's listening to this and thinking, oh no, now to go and do this and this and this and this and this. One thing is, SEO is one part of your marketing strategy. There's so many different parts. In fact, when I started in coaching, and it was a choice of, do I optimize my website? Do I do this? Do I do that? I had other SEOers saying, leave the SEO for now, Tazmin. Your visibility is far more impacted by you going and doing other talks and being physically visible. So bear in mind, it's one element of it. Another element that I think is also important and sort of goes hand in hand is the copywriting element of it. And this is where I'm getting a little bit more clued on, because a description, when somebody sees a podcast title, they want to know why they need to listen to it, what's in it for them. And if you're talking in vague terms, it's not going to land. But I think when you start going down the SEO route, work out what is best practice, and then anything that you publish, after you understand that, you're already paving the way. And for everything else, create a list, chip away at it bit by bit by bit. It doesn't all have to be done in a day. Everything that you do is an improvement on where you were yesterday. So, have the awareness, make a list, chunk it down, chip away, and be kind to yourself, because it's a lot.
So just having a think about all these sort of things that podcasters can focus on. Let's say a podcaster who's listening hasn't done any of this. Would you say just sort of, like you say, just sort of pick one thing and get really good at that? Or would you say it's sort of not worth getting started unless you're going to sort of look into it more holistically? I'm just thinking, yeah, like you say, there's a lot to think about, and podcasters might be thinking, which thing shall I start doing? Like, if they didn't have a website, if they didn't have, if their titles to their episodes were just the guest name, it didn't have any kind of SEO, would there be one particular thing that you'd suggest getting started with, or would it not be worth doing one thing at a time?
So this is a great question, but it's a tricky question to answer, because unfortunately, when it comes to SEO, there's a lot of different moving parts. So if you think back to what I said earlier, that Google has an algorithm that it looks at to rank and decide where it's going to rank certain pages in its search results, right? And there is a checklist. There's so many times where I'll see a page that is ranking quite well on page 1, and I'm like, how? It's not doing all the practices. It's not doing everything that an SEO professional would be doing. So there are always times where things are going to be out of your control. As you're getting to do SEO and you're having a look, there'll be pages that you're just like, why is that ranking? It's awful content. It's not great. What's going on? So just as a caveat, that unfortunately Google throws curveballs. There's so much stuff that you can control because it's your website, but there's things that are outside of your control. And yes, I 100% get the question of like, it feels like there's a lot going on, and like, should someone even bother if they can only do like one thing? 100%, because anything that you can do is an improvement on what you are currently doing right now. And it's don't get disheartened because you can't do it all. You can't implement this big swanky all singing all dancing SEO strategy. Whatever you can do, whether that is like an hour, half an hour, and you chip away at it, which is what Tazmin was saying, you're in a much better position, because you don't want to end up having a mindset of, well, I can't be perfect. I can't do it all, so I may as well not even bother. I think that's the wrong approach. The better approach, and Tasmin, please let me know what you think about this as well, is taking things bit by bit, implementing what you can, spending the time that you can. And as you see results and things start picking up, you might be able to expand and do more. But yeah, don't get disheartened at the start.
Yes, I mean, from what I understand, it's like it can be a very long game as well, especially in sort of busy niches. So, Tasmin, what would you say if somebody was getting started with this and, you know, they were trying a few different things for a few months and they just saw no progress whatsoever? Like their website still wasn't ranking, they couldn't find any of their episodes on the search terms that they expected to find them, and they were thinking, you know what, this isn't really worth the time. What would you say to those people?
I think it's really important to understand why you're doing something. So if this is the wider, I'm creating this podcast because I want it to back up my business. I want it as a marketing tool, for example. So although it sort of worked out for me in a convoluted way, but it does align. So I'm here sitting as a coach, wanting to help people with confidence and well-being. And actually, the podcast is where we talk about confidence and well-being. But I've only got a certain amount of time. Do I spend it optimizing my website, or do I spend it repurposing that content and writing blogs for different people and coming on different podcasts? That for me is going to get me more visibility than chipping away at my website. So it's really important to understand why you're doing what you're doing. I read a book recently, Key Person of Influence by Daniel Priestley. And what he talks about is you need to know your pitch, you know, what is it that you're trying to do? And then you have to publish stuff. So the more content that is out there by Tasmin about confidence and well-being, then that's what I'll be known for. Far easier than if I just concentrate on the website. So really think about what is your return of investment. And I'm not talking about money. If you're doing it yourself, off your time. If you have decided that you're going to go and update your website, actually, Sarah, this is a question for you. My first job in SEO was at Argos. In fact, that's the only job in SEO. And one of my first tasks was to do the page titles for a category. I think it was bed sheets or something, balanced bed sheets, this bed sheet, that bed sheet. Would you recommend somebody did all of their page titles, or would you recommend they did one page at a time and did everything on that one page?
Yes, that is a perfectly reasonable way of tackling how to do SEO jobs. And I'm still going to say it depends. It depends on resource, your goals, what you're trying to achieve. Because obviously, when it comes to optimization, how long's a piece of string? Like, there is so much that you can do to one page that it can be overwhelming. Like, if you try and physically tick off everything that Google wants you to do, like page titles, image description, schema, markup, website speed, layout, right? There is a massive list, and that list is only getting bigger and bigger. So a better way of dealing with that is chunking it down and be like, okay, what is it that I want to tackle? What is it that I can do? And also pick something that's going to have the biggest impact. So is it the page titles? If I spend time changing the page titles on the bed category for Argos, is that going to move the needle? Sorry, that was marketing business lingo there, and I hate using that sometimes. But always pick the jobs, think of prioritization, and think, okay, what's going to have the biggest impact? And always think about how much time something's going to cost as well, how much time something's going to take. So a big thing that I always see is people have issues with image optimization, because depending on the types of images that you have on your website, this can really slow down your website speed. Now, obviously, depending on how many pages you've got on your website and how many images, that's going to take a long time compressing them into smaller images. So always align it with your business goals, think about it strategically, chunk it down and be like, okay, what is the one job that's going to make the biggest impact?
Thank you. Yeah, I feel like people...
Mic drop.
People do get too sort of in the weeds with these things, and I mean it's the same for me. Like there've been projects that I've gotten started with, like, I need to go through every single one of my blog posts and update them, and it's like, okay, that's going to take me a whole day. What could I do in that day that's probably going to get me more results for the business? I just wanted to clarify a couple of things just in case people are thinking about these sort of changes that they could do if they want to get started with improving the SEO of their podcast, in case they have the same, in case they're asking these questions in their head as well. The answer to all of these might be it depends. We'll see. But on the website side of things, I think that can confuse some podcasters. I mean, definitely some that I've spoken to. So you've got the host website, as you mentioned. Captivate will let you create a web page and it will have your episodes on there. So this is going to be hosted on Captivate's or whatever host you use on their their website. Then most podcasters I speak to, they're already going to have a website. So let's say we've got a recruitment agency. They have their own website. They could put their episodes as blog articles on their main business website in the attempt to draw more traffic to that website. So do they also need to worry about their podcast host website, or do they need to consider starting a second or third website just with the name of the podcast, or are they going to be sort of spreading themselves too thin here, if you know what I mean?
I definitely, yeah, I'd be careful about spreading yourself too thin, because every website that you're setting up and putting together, you have to have time and resource to put into it in order for it to be successful. So how I think about it is, if you've already got a website and it's already generating traffic, people are already going, it's already ranking quite organically, nicely already, use that for your podcast. In my head, there's no point creating a whole new website that you have to start from scratch from. Yeah. I mean, I'd love to know if anyone has a different viewpoint to that. But in my head, it makes sense. So for the SEO mindset, it made sense for us to use the website that Captivate put together automatically, because me and Tazmin didn't have an existing website for the podcast.
Okay.
So it made sense for us to use Captivate and use that feature. However, what me and Tazmin are talking about is there will be a point where we want to create our own website, because don't get me wrong, the websites that the hosts put together are great. They look great. They host your episodes. They're responsive depending on what device you're on. But if you have your own website, you have more flexibility. You can do more stuff. So one thing that me and Tazmin talk about is one of the reasons why we want to have our own website and come away from using Captivate's generated one is it gives us more flexibility. So we take on sponsorship. So there's things that we can offer sponsors as part of a package, or I can repurpose, or we can repurpose episodes and publish them as blogs and posts. So if you have your own website that's already generating traffic, it's already ranking, it's already great, it's a no-brainer for me to use that to host and be a home for your podcast, because you're going to have more flexibility. You're going to be able to do more things. However, if you're just starting and it's a new project and you don't already have something that's existing, that's where it's great to use an existing website. Sorry, scratch what I just said, because it's the opposite of what I just said. And I'm sorry if I've just confused people there. But if you're just starting, like me and Tazmin did for the SEO Mindset, that's where it makes sense to use automatic website that gets generated by your host.
Cool. I think that will help clarify things for people who might be getting worried they need to start a whole new website and spend time on that as well. And then just one other thing that I wanted to clarify, and if you can give some clarification on that, was about the titles for your episodes. So wherever you are with the titles of your episodes, if you want to improve them, as you're mentioning about doing research on your keywords and getting those in there, do you have any comments on striking a balance between making the title of your episode really SEO friendly and also making it really clickable? Like if you've thought of a title that you feel is going to get a lot of clicks, like because it's highlighting some kind of controversial thing that came up in the episode, but then you've also found a keyword that you want to target for that you feel could do well, what would you say to striking the right balance there?
Again, it's a great question. Tazmin, did you want to deal with this one?
I think it's something that we're learning and we're getting better at. But what came to mind when you said that, I was watching a video of my mate Ali Abdul.
Your best mate.
My best mate. He's doing really, really, really well for himself.
Yeah.
He spends as long on the hook and the image for his YouTube videos than he spends on the actual videos. So it's something that, and it's working for him. And you know what? I would actually like more help on this myself, because reading copywriting secrets where they say, anytime you must use the word you and your, don't use we and they, and because it's not direct enough, and what's in it for them, and then you've got the whole SEO element of it and keywords research, and it's so confusing. I think look at yourself, look at which ones are you going to click on, what do you find attractive, even if it's like emails, which are the emails that you're opening, what is it about that title that makes you open it? What about the titles of podcast episodes? And I think you've just got to go with your own gut and find your own style.
Just to add my thoughts, because I completely agree, Tazmin, that the hook is really important, and it goes back to what I said earlier, is loads of people have podcasts nowadays. So you have to stand out from the crowd. You have to have a way that you hook and you engage with your audience. And something that you should be doing anyway is when you are planning a podcast, spend time thinking about your ideal listener, your avatar, because what you can make sure is whenever you're putting together your podcast episodes, when you're planning or anything like that, you're always thinking about your audience. And it's the same about the title. So what is going to resonate and what's going to work? Now, it is a great question. Like, do I need to think about SEO? Do I need to think about Google? Something that I will say is Google's getting smart, and Google understands, I can never say this word, so let's see if I can say it first off. Synonyms. Hey, I did it. I always want to say synonyms. Synonym. But anyway, I won't derail myself. But Google is smart, yeah? So what is great is it's always good to do your keyword research and have an idea of what people are searching for, because then you can sort of expertly get it into your title. So make sure that you've got it in there, but it doesn't have to be exact match. You can't, like I say, Google understands synonym. I fluffed it. Google understands synonyms. It's getting more smart, so it has an understanding of, okay, this is what this keyword is and these are the synonyms around it and stuff. So always think of the hook, think about your audience, think of ways that is going to make your title clickable but still trying to use the keyword. Also, something to consider is if you have in mind what people are searching for, when you are recording your episode, you're naturally going to say it. So when you create the transcript and put the transcript on your page, you're going to have the keyword there as well, and the synonyms and stuff. I fluffed it again. Let's not count how many times I say it right and wrong. So yeah, it's a bit of I hope that gives some clarity on that. But my main advice here is SEO should always enhance your pages. SEO should never get in the way.
Yeah.
So SEO should never be like, I want to have this really awesome, cracking, engaging title, but I can't because of SEO. That should not be your mindset. Yeah. Always think of the hook. So, and think of things that are interesting, or think about your audience.
I think also the other way, you might have a really great SEO optimized title, but then the content needs to be valuable. So don't create rubbish, create really high quality value for the listener and help them. And what you said, Sarah, about knowing what your avatar is, I know it's a word that's said again and again and again, but it's so key. If you start from that point and get to know that person as much as you possibly can, I feel that the rest of it flows. And practice, copywriting, is so much bigger than I ever thought it was. Practice, write about it on social media, look at what's working, what's not working, look at the data. The other day, and just have fun with it. The other day I was on this podcast, and it was Emina, and she called me the Zen Queen. So for a bit of a laugh, I went on LinkedIn, and my title was, people have been calling me names this week. And then I said, and they're calling me Zen Queen. There was no image, there was nothing fancy about it. It was just me with that one line, and then I rambled on about it. And there's a huge amount of engagement on it. So play around, have fun.
Yeah.
Don't take it too seriously. It's a podcast, We're not saving lives here. I mean, we're enhancing lives, but we're not saving lives here. And just keep measuring.
Yeah, love it. Really good points to finish off. Keeping the human in mind, it sounds like, is the takeaway. That's been an SEO masterclass, I think, from both the angles that you've taken to it. Like, got a lot of information for podcasters who want to get started or improve their SEO or are feeling overwhelmed. So thanks a lot for that. So the SEO Mindset Podcast, is there anything that you're planning for over the next year? Anything, any new angles you've taken to it, or just where are you hoping to go with it?
Well, very excitingly, we do a live podcast twice a year.
Okay.
Yeah. So Tazmin, and we've teamed up with our pal Jack Chambers-Ward from Search with Canada. And every time Brighton SEO happens, it's a no-brainer for us because we physically get together and see our ideal listener, because both podcasts, we are talking to SEOs. And we invite people to come along to a live podcast. So we record an episode in front of a live audience. And what's really lovely about that is usually you don't get to have an interaction with your audience. It's kind of one way, isn't it? You're talking to a microphone and your listeners are tuning in. But when we do a live podcast, they're part of the episode. We do a Q&A and sharing session as well. So they get to be recorded and be part of the podcast. And it's a bit of like a behind the scenes, but it's wonderful, isn't it, Tazmin?
It is. And we have more exciting news to share. We are going to be publishing our 100th episode on the 25th of July. So that's really cool. And
nice.
They're going to write a book about us and make a movie. I always wanted to say.
Doing anything special for the 100th?
Are we doing anything special? We've got some. We're working on some things, aren't we?
Yeah, we are.
Cool.
But yeah, and tomorrow we're recording at Sarah's new studio, so I'm really looking forward to that. But I think it's also really stepping into. I feel like the podcasts has got these really big boots now, and we've done great things and we've recorded some great episodes, and now it's really stepping into them and growing ourselves and reaching out and talking to the industry and seeing how they can help us help the industry, because that's effectively what we're trying to do. So
I think when we started, we didn't really know where it was going to go. We knew that we wanted to have these conversations and bring up certain important topics around mental health, career development, personal growth. And ultimately, I'm just very appreciative that I get to record podcasts with Tazmin, and we have a platform where we can invite wonderful guests to come and talk about their own experiences, and people get really raw, open and honest too. That's really lovely. But I suppose we're just gonna crack on, carry on growing, carry on creating, carry on. We have strategy sessions of like where we want to grow, what we want to achieve. So we've got ideas around how we can give more and other things that we want to do. So it won't just stop at the live podcast. I'm sure there'll be more initiatives and more things that we do. But yeah, we're just here for the ride, aren't we, Tazmin?
Yeah, and I think the world changes, this whole industry changes, what people want change, and it's a really exciting place to be.
Well, thank you again. So anyone who wants to take a listen, and I recommend you do, especially if you're interested in SEO, improving the SEO of your podcast, or if you're in the SEO space yourself, that's the SEO Mindset Podcast, anywhere you find your podcasts. And you can also follow Tazmin and Sarah on LinkedIn. Is there anywhere else that people should be looking?
So basically, yeah. So the podcast URL is the SEOmindset.co.uk. And then for me, if you search Sarah McDowell SEO, or Sarah McDuck, as someone pointed out to me that it stands for, I'm on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram. I'm trying to break it into TikTok, but like nothing too big to report on that. But yeah, I'm basically anyway, if you just search Sarah McDowell SEO, hopefully I'll come up. And then Tazmin's
a LinkedIn girl.
There you
go.
Yeah.
At the website tazminsuleman.com. But yes, mainly LinkedIn.
Oh, I have a website now as well, sarahmcdowell.co.uk. There you go.
All right, I'll make sure I add that one to the list and get that in the show notes.
Thank you very much.
Well, thanks again to both of you, and yeah, look forward to seeing how things go with the podcast for the second half of the year.
Thank you very much for having us. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to Podcasting Amplified. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave a review on your favourite podcast platform. We'll be back next time with another conversation offering more insights to take your podcast to the next level and help you to achieve success. Happy podcasting.